Is your family farm's future uncertain? Silence may be the biggest risk of all. Discover how open conversations and gradual planning can secure your legacy and empower the next generation. Don't wait, start the dialogue today. Learn more and download a transition planning checklist at fcc.ca/knowledge.
Okay, obviously we've got a lot happening in the world of canola, and and quite frankly, sometimes we forget to mention some of the impacts of pulse and aquaculture and pork as well when it comes to the tariffs that China has applied on Canadian commodities. But canola is taking up a lot of the oxygen in the room, and rightly so, based on its economic contribution to the Canadian farmer. Joining us right now as the President and CEO of the Canadian Canola Growers Association is Rick White. Rick, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm doing good. Okay, so Friday afternoon, anticipated that we would have an announcement from the federal government related to, I guess, addressing this issue. I don't know if I would say supporting Canadian farmers, but trying to address the issue. CCGA, along with Canola Council of Canada, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but dissatisfied or not exactly happy about what was announced. Why?
Well, we found when we went through the announcement, I would say first and foremost, when we went through there, and we've had a lot of interaction with the federal government on this, we've had a lot of input. They have very, very much listened to us. And the disappointment comes in terms of this initial announcement from them seems to miss the mark significantly from what we have been advising them on what the severity of the situation is and some of our ideas on what kind of support for the industry will be required longer term, not just not for the here and now, but for the longer term. And we just think it fell short. Now, I don't think this is the end all and be all. This is a step. And we've been reminded this is a step by the federal government. This isn't the package or the end result. But we just couldn't see how this addresses the severity of the situation, especially for farmers in the industry, larger industry as well. So we are just disappointed. We expressed that disappointment both in a press release and directly to the Minister of Agriculture. I think we have a good understanding. He understands us, and we understand the situation with the government. It's going to take some time, but at the end of the day, we're running out of time, and farmers don't have time.
Yeah, we had Minister McDonald we played some audio with him yesterday on the show, and he did mention this, the first step, work in progress. But like you said, farmers are feeling a lot more urgency on this matter. If you could, with a swipe of a pen, hey Rick, what should we do? What have you been telling the federal government they need to do?
Well, we've been on the farmer front. What we've been advising the government and trying to articulate to the government the severity of the situation that could be faced by farmers. So first and foremost, we want a negotiated way out of this as quickly as possible and get the market back open. That's first and foremost. That is a long shot with China. It takes a long time for this to happen. We know the reality of that situation. But I do know that farmers want the market back. However, there's going to be, I think, some significant economic pain, and we're starting to see that now, and farmers are starting to feel that now. They got a whole lot of canola coming in off the field. It's going into the bins, and with China locking us out of the market, that's about $5 billion worth of canola just to that market. So when I do my back of the napkin math, I looked at the closing futures price that farmers are priced off of back in August, the Friday before the announcement came on the preliminary tariffs. It was running around $680 a ton at that time. Fast forward to now, the nearby futures market closed on September 5th at $616.80. So we're talking a good $60 drop.
Yep.
On a 20 million ton crop, which is the price affects all of it, that's $1.2 billion in lost value of the canola that farmers have grown. And that's just a $60 drop, Sean. This could go even further. I'm not a marketer and I'm not predicting anything, but just suppose it goes $100 under and stays there, which is quite possible. That's a $2 billion loss in value of the farmer's canola that they've got coming right now. That is what we're looking at. And what we're asking the government for is to find a way to compensate farmers, not to their profitability level, but to compensate them, a compensatory payment, one shot, one time. But we don't know what that payment should be. We don't know what that amount should be. And this might all be for naught if we can get China fixed in the meantime.
Yeah.
But if we're still talking about this next year and we're $100 a ton under where it should be, I think it's right that the farmer should be compensated to the amount that they actually lost in the market, in the value of the canola.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you about the timing of that, right? So is that ad hoc programming today, or is that ad hoc programming into more of the 26 calendar year?
It's the latter, Sean, because to be compensatory, you have to measure what the impact was. And we don't know what the impact is yet. It's just starting. We don't know where it's going to go. But I think our advice to the government was to get a plan in place and get the money in place in case it is needed, rather than waiting until this time next year and then scrambling and not being able to do it. So we're trying to get them ready for the severity of the situation and put some idea on the table about how much this is. Because when we see an announcement of a $5 billion program, that's great, but that's not just for canola. That's for every other impacted industry, steel, aluminum, auto, you name it. Yep. They're all in there, including canola. And we got a $2 billion problem looming here just for the farmers. And that's a big chunk of change.
Yeah. And it's when we look at canola seed, meal, and oil, China is, the second largest market for Canadian exports. The largest is obviously the U.S. The result here is a lot more focus on trying to get exports of those three products to the American market, but also potentially finding a path to some of Australia's markets like Bangladesh and Pakistan, for example.
Yeah, and the other message is that we to the government is there's no making up for China. We are going to do our best to diversify. We always haven't done maybe a good enough job in hindsight, but that's where the biofuels issue comes in. That is a market development, market creation, market demand that the government can control, and we're encouraging them to do that. But we are looking for other opportunities elsewhere. The market will always do that, but we don't want to be under the illusion that we'll find all these other smaller markets and it'll add up to the absence of China. We still need China. We still need market diversification through biofuels and every other country that we can think of.
Do you feel, Rick, that there needs to be more attention paid to biofuels? Because, some biofuel analysts I talk to believe that China is that replacement for having issues on trading canola with and exporting to China. Biofuels are that replacement. So are we maybe not talking about it as optimistically and as big of a value as we should, as what the reality is?
Well, the reality is if we get exactly what the biofuel market needs here in Canada, we anticipate it could be 2 million tons of seed going into a substantial Canadian biofuel market. 2 million tons is only gets you barely halfway to the China gap that's created here.
But what about the U.S.
It's not
market,
a replacement. I'm sorry.
What about the U.S. market, though? Like the entire state of California could take almost the entire Canadian canola crop, is what I've been told.
Well, it probably could, but not under their current regulations, which is not as favorable to Canadian canola as it once was. So their expansion down there, at best, Canada or Canadian canola is going to have the same tonnage, but proportionally of the bigger pie down there, we're not getting a piece of the extra pie. So it's going to be hopefully consistent with what we have done in the past in California, the way the regs are set up down there, because they don't give us a full credit for the carbon reduction.
Yeah, one of the big policy pushes from a lobbying perspective of Canada is putting on the U.S. What Rick's talking about there is after the big beautiful bill, the budget reconciliation bill that was passed on July 4th, the Canadian RIN is at 50% of the value. It's considered domestic feedstock in the U.S., Canadian corn or canola, but it is at 50% of the RIN value, which is something that Canadian officials are pushing hard on. I'm sure CCGA is a part of that. Used cooking oil. I'm wondering, Rick, that was one of the asks is to put a ban on it. This is a product coming out of China that is can be used in the biofuel market. It disadvantages Canadian canola. This has been a big issue in the United States too regarding soybeans for biofuels and using some of those tax credits. Do you feel that the government and ECCC needs to move on this now?
Definitely, because China has been using UCO to try to penetrate markets, and they caused all kinds of commotion, not commotion, but disruption, I guess, in the U.S., and they shut that down. And we know they're coming and that they are coming into Canada. And what we're trying to do is ensure that they don't come and interrupt our market to the extent that it had been doing other places. So it's the adulteration, the potential for adulteration of used cooking oil and coming in and undermining and replacing what should be Canadian virgin oil is something that we're trying to convince the government they need to do something about. Now, that's really more of the crushers issue, but it does impact growers, right? We don't want UCO to come into Canada and displace our domestic market for our own canola.
Minister McDonald mentioned UCO or UCO on when we did our interview Friday afternoon, unprompted, but they weren't as resolute in the announcement that they were going to ban it. It seems like there is a bit of a hang up there.
There is a bit of a hang up, and between UCO and the clean fuel regulations, changes that are required to create a better domestic biodiesel market for our Canadian canola, what we're worried about is the wording in the announcement talks about longer term and time to change legislation and consultation and on and on and on. We're worried it's going to be a 1 to 1.5 year process. We just don't have that kind of time. We need to short circuit it. We need to target it. And the government legislation needs to be sped up. The whole process needs to be sped up because time is of the essence here. Farmers don't have a year and a half to wait for the start of newly created biofuel market here in Canada for the product. We need it now.
Do you feel that given where we are today with China, that we should have been talking more at the primary producer level about biofuels earlier?
I would say, Sean, we've been talking about it ever since I came to CCGA, since 2003. So it's not a new issue. It's been an ongoing issue, and it's been a bit of an uphill battle. We've had some successes with domestic, I shouldn't say domestic, but regional, provincial mandates from the past, and we've been trying to build on that nationally. But I don't think the government understood the urgency of it or kind of the why it mattered so much to have that in place. But we've been pushing it for a long time. But now politically, it's come into the forefront as part of the solution to get us by and through and reduce our dependence on the China market.
One of the things that groups have been calling for is Prime Minister Carney needs to make a trip to China and meet face to face with President Xi. Why do you feel that is a key to the solution?
Feel very strongly about that one, Sean, and this has been part of our request of the federal government at every opportunity that we have is the issue with China is not anti-dumping. We know that. We've proven that. We're part of the process of providing the information required to prove that anti-dumping, from our perspective, did not occur. And it hasn't. Our data shows it. The questionnaires show it that we answered through the MOFCOM process. So the reality is this is a political problem and it requires a political answer. And where you start with that is that Prime Minister Carney and President Xi need to eventually here, as soon as they can make that happen, they need to sit down and agree that this needs to be fixed. Without that, we're not going to have a hope of moving China in one direction or the other, because we believe it's a geopolitical issue, and they need to set the stage that way. The opportunity is now, and we've been pushing hard because now we've seen China extend the preliminary determination of the anti-dumping investigation for another 6 months. There is a window of opportunity here for the political aspect to get kickstarted by our prime minister to get that high level discussion going and hopefully get into a negotiation of what is going to be required to get that market back. And that's what we've been saying. This window of opportunity has been extended another 6 months. Once it locks down as a final determination, it's going to be awfully hard to get out of that and have that negotiated, in our view. So we're really pressing for that. It's critical.
Yeah. Well, really appreciate you joining us here today, Rick. Thank you so much, and all the best to you in your efforts here.
Thanks, Sean. Appreciate it.